welcome to Mooney Reads, and welcome to a mid-year check-in. It is July, therefore past the halfway point of the year, and in order to talk about my reading in the first half of the year, I'm going to be pulling from the original, problematically named mid-year freakout tag, as well as the mid-year calm down tag. I saw Alex from Pucks and Paperback doing both of these tags at the same time. So go watch his video. I'm going to be doing something similar. I'm going to be going through and answering the questions to each of these. Granted, the original tag has kind of morphed at this point, and I'm also going to be restructuring it a little bit because I'd like to talk about the books that I've read and then the books that I want to read. And so we'll be going a little bit out of order, but it'll be fun, and I'll get to talk about books that I read. Now, unlike years past, I won't have all of these in a video or in one that is currently filmed and ready to come out. I've been really behind on my wrap-ups, but I haven't really been making much of anything. But I would like to make some videos where I talk about a lot of the books that I haven't talked about yet, so hopefully that is to come. I'm speaking it into the world now so that I'll do that. So the first question of the original mid-year tag is, how has your reading year been? And it's been pretty good, I suppose. I don't know. Numbers wise, the kind of default 50 books that I would at least like to get to, I'm certainly on my way to surpass that, which is good, I guess. Kind of under my page limit goal. I feel like a lot of my goals sort of went out the window at a certain point. I really need to reevaluate what I said at the beginning of the year to see if that's totally true, but I have been reading every month, so I'll call that a win. I've read a total of 37 books in the first half of the year, and about 2/3 of them were physical, with 30% being audio. My best reading month book number-wise was February, with 8 books, but if we are looking by page count, March was actually slightly better, by about 500 pages. It makes sense that it's the earlier part of the year that was so much better, and also I'm sure physical book heavy, because after March, it was a lot of audiobooks, and that is what makes May look so impressive, and obviously audiobooks are fine. They are just not my norm for the majority of books in a month. My posting, reading, and everything else slowed down a lot after the end of March, because my brother passed away unexpectedly. He was only 22, and it's absolutely god-awful, and I don't know how to talk about it, but things slowed down after that. Everything slowed down after that, but I'm trying really hard to be kind of normal. And after that said, the first question in the other tag is thankfulness. What has 2025 given me thus far? Other than absolute dog shit on top of the dumpster fire that is the American government. Some good things are that I've started to play Stardew Valley. I've played it before, but on PC, and several years ago. I recently bought it for my Switch. And it's been really cool, so I'm gonna call that my good thing. I've also been trying to get more into, some, analog, craft stuff, which I've done previously with, crochet and cross-stitch and stuff. But trying to do more, doodling and some zine making and things like that. Those things I'm thankful for. Other things I can be thankful for are the books that are the answer to number 2 of the original mid-year tag, and that is, what is the best book that you've read this year so far? Which is always the hardest question. I'm so bad at picking favorites, but I'm probably gonna say She by Minnie Bruce Pratt. I'm not sure the best way to kind of say this title out loud. It's S/HE. This was such an incredible memoir. It's one of those that you can tell that's written by a poet, which are some of my favorites. It's a series of vignettes, and she talks about growing up gay, in the South, marrying young and having kids and then coming out. Then goes through and talks about a lot of her various people that she's been with and that have been special to her. But it all culminates to when she meets Leslie Feinberg. And the whole book is addressed to Leslie. And it's just really beautiful. There's a lot in here about love, obviously, but also she talks some about her activism in different ways and the importance of solidarity. I just absolutely loved this. And if you wanted to hear about this, I did read it as I was vlogging. I read this and another book, also with pronouns in the title, Her, which was really cool. So definitely check out more about those two. It's not the best book that I've read so far to answer this question, but it is definitely a standout and a really interesting one that I think about often. So there are those to think about. I'm going to continue on with the third question in the original mid-year tag, which is the best sequel so far. And I don't tend to read series. I'm just really bad at it. I'm bad at finishing one book. Then you want me to go and finish like 3 books or 5 books, or God forbid there's more. It's just not really gonna happen, I fear. However, I do have an answer to this, because in the first part of the year, I started to read the Moonlighters novellas by Anita Kelly. Not that it matters too much, I suppose, but I have finished the trilogy. The third one I technically read this month. But my favorite one was the first one that I read, and technically the third in the series, which makes it a sequel, even though you don't really have to read them in order. But that is Wherever Is Your Heart. I saw the cover and absolutely had to start with this. What other books that focus on an older butch couple, any butch couple, really, put all of your butch for butch recommendations below, please. But this was just so good, so sweet. It was everything, really. I don't want to say too much because it's a novella, you know. But the people featured here are a trucker that occasionally goes through the town of this gay bar that is the place that ties together the novella trilogy. And she ends up flirting with the bartender that she's known for all of these years. So it's got like a slow burn quality to it, even though it's a novella. And I love like the music references that they put in it, and I'm just obsessed, and I don't want to say too much because if I start talking, it will be just way too much talking about such a small book. And there's just no way to manage spoilers on that. But this is so good and so cute. And to be honest, is also the best fiction book that I've read this year. Now we can switch gears back into questions from the Calm Down tag, including question number 2 for this tag. Relaxation. What is the most relaxing book that you've read this year? And for that, I'm going to say Wintering. I listened to this on audiobook. Throughout the course of this book, the author is talking about basically going through like a huge period of burnout. She just does way too much at work. Also finds out through the course of all this that she's autistic. She ends up just getting really like physically ill as well, and goes through and talks about different things, both in culture and also in nature, and how people deal with these periods of kind of slowing down. So of course, kind of maybe the obvious that you could think of, like hibernation, but also certain rituals that she encounters on during some traveling that she does. It was just really nice and soothing. The only thing that I didn't like about it is towards the end of the book, there's like a casual reference to Margaret Thatcher, which is the opposite of relaxing to me. Like, it, I guess, makes it, she just uses her as an example for something in passing, but it's like, could you not find like literally anything else? Um, that was my main gripe. It's mostly quite a nice book. And then question 3 is Hydration, which is a book that you needed. And I have 2 for this one. Um one of them, I'll start with the more like practical one. Which I actually have. How to Eat Well for Adults with ADHD. I will say, this is made for adults with ADHD, but would be useful to anyone who struggles with interoception or executive function, and would probably be beneficial for people who've dealt with disordered eating. But this focuses on intuitive eating, particularly for neurodivergent people. I initially picked up the book because I was flipping through and I saw the sections where they were talking about figuring out how to meal plan and meal prep, kind of kitchen organization, as well as like grocery list, figuring that stuff out, because it's hard. It's quite hard. So I kind of bought it without really knowing that it goes into the intuitive eating stuff, which is like the main part of it. But I found it incredibly helpful. I really loved going through this, and I've already been kind of evaluating my relationship with food, and things like that. But this does it really well, made me think about a lot, and has a lot of useful stuff in here. I will say that I have a minor gripe about this one, similar to the one that I just mentioned, because both of these are like things that I don't want to not mention when recommending them, or talking about them. There's a small section in this one that talks about AI. It's not a really big section, and they don't go really in depth, but they also don't talk enough about the negatives for my taste. But I ended up really enjoying this book, and it is definitely one that I need and will continue referencing and stuff like that. The other one that I have for this one is a little less literal, and that is The Seance Tea Party, which is a really cute middle grade graphic novel about a girl in middle school who is dealing with kind of growing up, and her friends are kind of on different wavelengths, and she's still very much kind of embracing childhood. So she's dealing with all of this stuff and decides to hold a seance tea party, where she finds a ghost who used to be her, what she thought was her imaginary friend. A bit of an adventure ensues. This was really sweet and cute, and towards the beginning I kind of thought, oh, this is nice, this is okay. But by the end of it, it says some really profound stuff about friendship and about death and grieving. And it was just really beautiful, and definitely one that I needed to read. Then question number 4 is Nourishment, a book that energized me. And I'm gonna say Minnie Bruce Pratt's memoir again, just because it was so good. That's the first thing that came to my mind when I saw this question. Number 5 of the mid-year calm down tag is Familiarity, an author that I've returned to. And I have 2 answers for this. One could be Anita Kelly, because I have returned to them, simply because I've read more than one book. I had not read one before this year, but this year I've read more than one. My other answer is Suzanne Collins, because I did reread The Hunger Games, and it absolutely holds up. I really, really enjoyed it. I plan on rereading the rest of the trilogy so that I can read the new book about Haymitch. I will not be reading the book on President Snow. You could not pay me enough money to read about that man. However, I have high hopes for the rest of the series. I have been vlogging my way through that. I've actually been reading reading The Hunger Games alongside other books that deal with content that inspired parts of The Hunger Games. Suzanne Collins wrote The Hunger Games after flipping channels as she was seeing coverage of the war in Iraq. So seeing these images of war and really awful things alongside like advertising and normal reality TV and all of this other stuff. So I've been reading books on the war on terror. I read a Howard Zinn book on it. I've also am planning to pick up books on other issues that are covered or kind of tangential to the book. For instance, I'm going to be reading some on kind of the history of the mines and like labor history in that part of the country, especially looking at where the district that Katniss is from is supposed to have been in. But I've gotten kind of off track. I returned to Suzanne Collins, and I'm very happy with it so far. And then question number 6 is health risk. No, not health risk. Prompt number 6 is healthy risk. Books outside of your comfort zone. And for that, I'm going to say Gender Without Identity. Obviously, books on gender and queerness are very much in my wheelhouse. However, this one is specifically looking at psychoanalysis, which I feel like I might have known more than the average person about, but not by too much. Not by too much. Mostly what's covered in like undergraduate psychology classes. So I ended up going down a huge rabbit hole when I read this, or really before I read this. I watched so many interviews with these authors and I got really into it. And I really wish I would have been vlogging during that process, because I did all of that and read it in early March. And then finished it when my brain was scrambled eggs at the end of it. But I really loved the whole process of learning more in order to really dig into this book. It was a whole niche that I wasn't aware of, but actually it's really pertinent to what's going on politically. Because psychoanalysis specifically is being weaponized against trans people. Like some of these organizations that are turfy or outright, right wing transphobic. And the authors are also within psychoanalysis and are refuting this and or refuting kind of the things that they're saying. So that was outside of my comfort zone, but a really good time nonetheless. And now I'm going to go back to the original tag. And I will be bouncing around a little bit here just because I like this order better. The next questions that this tag has that are about this past 6 months reads, we have the worst book that you read, as well as the biggest disappointment. I'm not sure, to be honest with you, which ones were a part of the original tag or if both were in the original tag, but regardless, the question or the answer is the same for both, and that is your brain on art. I actually went into this with like no expectations. I literally just grabbed it because it was the Barnes & Noble pick of the month. I found it on Libby. I figured I'd try it out. So for it to be such a disappointment is perhaps surprising because I went in with like no expectations. But the thing is, after I started reading, I was really enjoying like the first half of it. It talks about how art is used in therapeutic ways, not just psychology, stuff like art therapy, but also looking at things like music or sounds and how like the physical, like the sound waves are going to affect your physical body, and research that's done on that. So all of that was super cool, and I really loved this. If the book stopped like halfway through, it would have been a very positive experience and we would not be here. But unfortunately, they did not stop there. When they brought in some of the businessy shit, that's not my thing. Like, why do I care about what the Starbucks CEO thinks about creativity. Like, I'm so sorry, but fuck off. And they also, like, they mention, I forget the specifics of it at this point, but they do mention indigenous people. There was like a specific example of one group's like attitude towards art or how it was used, and that in and of itself would be cool, except the tone that the book had. Like, you can tell that it's a bunch of white people observing this and explaining it, rather than someone who actually knows something. And then I think that was like around or near when they brought up the Starbucks CEO, which just made it like that much worse. And then on top of that, the conclusion that they come to after all this shit. But throughout this whole book, I feel like there's so much that can be taken from this to talk about community and other really great things. None of which are like individualism and bootstrappy kind of ideology, which is what the conclusion feels like. You know, I probably articulated better in the wrap-up that I originally talked about it on. But that's been so long ago, I don't really remember what I said about it, to be honest. So yeah, the conclusion was hot garbage. There was a lot of stuff in the second half of the book that I didn't like, which makes it the worst book and also the biggest disappointment, because the first half was actually good. Turning back to a more positive note, another question in the original tag is the biggest surprise. And for this one, I put 1919 by Eve Ewing, which is a poetry collection, but is also a recollection of history and goes into kind of thinking about the future as well. This is primarily focused on the Chicago race riots of 1919. Not only is it really great poetry, like she does a lot with these different pieces, but using this as a way to talk about history is just incredible. It was really layered and was able to talk about a lot of different things at once. I think that we need more people with this sort of perspective talking about history and teaching history, and it makes me so excited to read Original Sin, which I bought this year. I bought it and then I read the other book, but this makes me way more excited to read this, just seeing kind of how her mind works, looking at this one specific event. And as I've discussed, I love reading other books by people who also write poetry. In the original tag, we also have favorite new to you author, unsurprisingly, Anita Kelly, who I've already talked about. We have a book that made you cry. I cried a lot of things. So it's not very hard to do, but the book that I'll talk about for this question is Laura Dean Keeps Breaking Up With Me. I reread this and I love this book so much, and every time I read it, I get a little bit more out of it. It's definitely one of those that I wish I would have had at different parts of my life. And this read through, I ended up focusing a lot on her best friend Doodle, and I had a lot of thoughts, none of which I'll probably share here because spoilers. But this is just a really incredible book looking at the impact of toxic relationships and abuse, but not just on one person, but how it affects kind of everyone in their life too. And looks a lot at friendship. But yeah, it's the third time I've read it, and it still made me cry. Now I'm going to jump back to a couple questions from the mid-year calm down tag, including reflections. What are some changes in your reading tastes that you've noticed this year? And the biggest thing that I've noticed is my nonfiction intake, which is kind of neat because a couple of years ago, 2, 3, I don't know. But my fiction to nonfiction ratio was about a third nonfiction, 2/3 fiction. And I was thinking that it would be nice if it were like a little bit more even. I have been successful in reading a little bit more nonfiction each year, but this year it's been a total flip. And now, this year so far, I've read about a quarter fiction, or not a quarter, about a third fiction and 2/3 nonfiction. So it has totally flipped. For whatever reason, I've been really grasping on to nonfiction as things have gotten harder. And really a lot of it I haven't even finished. So this is like not even counting the 500 million books I'm in the middle of reading, most of which are nonfiction. So that's my big reflection. So now that we're done talking about books and things that I have read this year, we're going to focus on things that I want to read. So the original tag has a question that is, what are new releases that you haven't read yet but are excited about? And I have so many of those. So many. This many. Probably more than this. These are just the ones that I grabbed from the shelves behind me. So I'm going to try to go through most of these really quickly. Amphibious, Stories of Queer and Trans Futurity. This is a fiction anthology edited by Lee Mandello. The reason that I picked it up is Lee Mandello. I'm sure that I also glanced through the authors and noted people. It's been a minute. Yeah, Margaret Killjoy is in here. Neon Yang. Recognizable voices. But also, if Lee Mandello's books are any indication, he has taste. So I'm excited. The Disco Witchers of Fire Island, I feel like I've heard nothing about, but sounds a little wacky and cool, and also intersects with my interest in like the 80s and 90s gay stuff. Stag Dance by Tori Peters. I was absolutely obsessed with Detransition Baby, so I'm super stoked for that one. Next, Harriet Tubman Live in Concert by Bob the Drag Queen. It's Bob the Drag Queen. I was going to pick it up regardless, but it's also gotten some really good blurbs, so I'm hopeful that it will be good. From there, we're going to slowly pivot to nonfiction. The first of which is Spent by Alison Bechdel. This is a graphic novel? Graphic nonfiction. The characters in this are named after real people. Like, the main character is Alison Bechdel, but it's kind of like her life, but in a slightly alternative universe where she's a goat farmer. I'm interested. It should be really interesting. I haven't heard too much from people who have read it yet, but I'm excited. From there, we're dipping into nonfiction, and I'm going to start with the one that is least like the others. And that is Poets Squared, and it's by the person who has the account Poet Squared. She works with feral cats. She has a colony outside of her house and works with TNR in a lot of places around her. And this is, I think, different stories about some of the cats that she's helped. This is absolutely going to make me cry. I'm such a sucker for videos and shit like this, so I'm really excited about the book. After that, I have The War of Art, A History of Artist Protest in America. I'm hoping to pick this up soon. I'm thinking after I finish reading Let the Record Show, I want to dig into this. Then we have Thank You for Calling the Lesbian Line, which is based off of a call log from a lesbian helpline in London. But I think it also has like memoir elements. There's a lot going on in it. It sounds really cool. Then we have Marsha, The Joy and Defiance of Marsha P. Johnson by Tourmaline, which is the first like actual biography of Marsha P. Johnson I've seen. And it's by someone who has also made a short film about Marsha P. Johnson. Happy Birthday, Marsha. This person, I think, was also working on her project on Marsha at the same time as someone else who ended up doing a really big documentary on her, and actually stole footage from her. It was a whole thing, and the documentary that ended up sealing it reads like too much like a true crime thing for comfort. So go watch Happy Birthday Marsha instead, and if you want a documentary, like a full documentary about Marsha B. Johnson to watch Pay It No Mind. It's available on YouTube. I'll put the link down there. You can just watch that after this. It has a lot of, it's really mostly just footage of people who knew Marsha or Marsha herself. And it's excellent. We're getting away from things. Books. This one, I want to read it. It looks cool. It came out this year. That's what the question's about. Then the final one that I have, I certainly will not read all of this year because it's giant. But A History of Transgender Medicine in the United States, From Margins to Mainstream. The title pretty much tells you everything you need to know. I went to an event where one of the authors, Jameson Green, talked about making this. He also has a memoir that is very much not new that I would also like to get and read. But this sounds really cool. They put so much work into this, looking at this history, so it's going to be really incredible. And from what other people have said, it reads faster than it looks. Like, it's not super textbooky, it's pretty readable. So that should be good. 100 books later, that's that question. The next one is the most anticipated release for the second half of the year, which has overlap with the question in the Calm Down tag, which is positivity, anticipated books or events. For both of those, I'm going to answer Andrew Joseph White's new book. I'm super stoked for that. I have only read one of his other books, Compound Fracture, and was absolutely obsessed. It was one of my favorite books last year. And I really want to get to reading the other 2 YA books that he has out, which are apparently more leaning into the horror bit. Like, Compound Fracture is apparently much more mild in that regard, but still had some pretty unsettling moments. So I'm really interested. The premise of his new book sounds really cool, and I don't really know what else is happening, and clearly I have enough 2025 releases. So it's probably for the best that I only have one for this question. We also have from the original tag, books to read by the end of the year. Certainly all those books that I just talked about. Reading some of those by the end of the year would be cool. I really want to finish Let the Record Show by the end of the year. That's really one of the big ones. I feel like I've said that for like more than 1 year, but that's fine. That's okay. We're getting through it. We're well past the halfway point. So it's looking good. There are lots of other books I'd like to read, obviously. This is stuff I'd like to read. This is stuff I'd like to read. But honestly, the TBR changes on a whim. So there's that. And then going back to the Calm Down tag, there are a couple of things about reading for the second half of the year. One of them is question number 8, which is Detox, a book / habit that I'm leaving behind. As well as number 10, which is looking ahead, personal plans and goals. I feel like all of these things are wrapped together because the thing that I would like to leave behind is guilt. So my goal going forward would just be to read something, anything. You know, I set up a lot of, I think, TBRs and things like that, which is all fun and cute, but putting less pressure on myself, the whole like numbers, finishing certain things at certain times, you know, it's all made up. Who cares? As long as you're reading something and having fun, that's like the point. And hopefully that can be kind of the vibe going forward. And then the final question is the last question that I have written down for the original tag, which is your favorite video that you made this year so far, the first 6 months. I feel like I've had a lot of fun making the vlog videos, so definitely those would be contenders up there. But I also really liked my underhyped trans books video. It would be really nice to get back into kind of some of the review videos, because those are not review, recommendation videos, because it's fun to kind of come up with those themes and stuff like that. So I'm gonna say that one. I hope I got to all of the questions that I wanted to get to. That is what my reading the first half of the year looked like, and some of what I'm thinking about right now. In the comments, let me know what your favorite book of the year has been so far. And thank you all so much for watching. Bye.